Nearly everything you think you know about what makes someone masculine or feminine has been shaped by cultural forces working alongside biology. The patterns we see today aren't universal discoveries about human nature. They're cultural constructions that vary dramatically across time and place. And the proof isn't buried in some dusty academic journal. It's visible in everyday examples, like how differently your own grandparents' generation divided household tasks, or how gender expectations shift completely when you travel to another country. Hi guys, I'm Monty and I'm a linguist and a history enthusiast. I create videos that give you a new perspective on modern concepts. If you learned something from this video, please consider liking it and subscribing to my channel to help me grow and create more of this kind of content. And let me know in the comments what you'd like to see me talk about in my next video. We're told gender roles are natural, that men hunt, women nurture, that boys are aggressive, girls are gentle, that these patterns emerge from biology, from evolution, from some deep truth about human nature. What's less obvious is that if gender roles were determined by biology alone, we'd expect much more consistency across cultures and time periods than we actually see. They wouldn't need constant social reinforcement. Yet walk into any toy store and you'll see the enforcement happening in real time. Pink aisles and blue aisles, dolls versus trucks, kitchen sets versus tool benches. This isn't nature expressing itself. This is society working overtime to create the very differences it claims to simply recognize. Today, we're examining how gender roles developed, why they vary so dramatically across cultures, and what happens when societies decide to organize themselves differently. Because understanding this isn't just academic curiosity, it's about recognizing the invisible forces that have been shaping your life since the moment you were born. The story begins with Margaret Mead's 1930s research in Papua New Guinea, which revealed something that challenged prevailing assumptions about gender. She studied 3 tribes and documented what should have been impossible if gender roles were truly biological. Among the Arapesh, both men and women were gentle, nurturing, cooperative, traits we'd call feminine. Among the Mundugamor, both sexes were aggressive, competitive, harsh, what we'd label masculine. And among the Chambuli, complete role reversal. Women dominated economics and social life while men focused on art and ceremony. 3 tribes, same species, same basic biology, completely different ideas about what men and women should be like. Mead's findings weren't just curiosities, they challenged fundamental assumptions about human nature. Because if gender roles were purely biological, you can't have opposite biological imperatives in neighboring values. That's not how evolution works. The formal study of gender roles as distinct from biological sex really began in the mid-20th century. John Money helped establish these concepts in the 1950s, defining gender roles as all those things that a person says or does to disclose himself or herself as having the status of boy or man, girl or woman. Notice what's missing from that definition. Any reference to biology, to nature, to inevitability. What Money understood is that gender roles are performances, scripts we learn, rehearse, and act out. And like any script, they can be rewritten. Take the Victorian era's separate spheres ideology. Men belonged in the public sphere, business, politics, intellectual life. Women belonged in the domestic sphere, home, children, moral guidance. This wasn't presented as one possible social arrangement among many. It was sold as biological destiny, God's design, the natural order of things. Yet this natural arrangement required an enormous amount of artificial support. Laws preventing women from owning property, from voting, from entering universities. Social sanctions against men who showed too much emotion or interest in domestic life. Pseudoscientific theories claiming that intellectual activity would literally damage women's reproductive organs. If these roles were truly natural, why did they need so much legal and social scaffolding? The answer reveals the fundamental truth. Gender roles aren't descriptions of human nature. They're prescriptions for human behavior. They don't emerge from biology. They're imposed despite biological flexibility. But the variation in gender roles isn't random. It follows patterns that reveal their true purpose. Gender roles don't just vary across cultures, they serve specific functions within the societies that create them. And those functions usually have nothing to do with biological differences and everything to do with power. Friedrich Engels, writing in the 19th century, traced how gender roles shifted with economic systems. In hunting and gathering societies, women often held high status because their gathering provided most of the calories. Property was communal, survival was cooperative, gender roles were relatively egalitarian. But as societies developed agriculture, private property, and class hierarchies, women's status plummeted. Not because their biology changed, because the economic system changed. Engels identified a pattern that anthropologists have documented worldwide. The more stratified a society becomes, the more rigid its gender roles become. The more wealth concentrates in fewer hands, the more women get pushed out of public life. This isn't coincidence, it's design. Consider ancient Sparta versus ancient Athens. Both Greek city-states, both existing simultaneously, both supposedly expressing the same natural gender roles. Yet Spartan women owned property, exercised publicly, wielded significant political influence. Athenian women were confined to their homes, forbidden from participating in public life, treated as legal minors their entire lives. Same culture, same time period, opposite gender arrangements. The difference wasn't biology, it was politics. The Roman Empire provides an even starker example. During the Republic, women like Cornelia, mother of the Gracchi brothers, were celebrated for their intelligence and political acumen. But as the empire consolidated power, women's public roles vanished. Roman historians actually documented how women's participation in public life had been more common in earlier periods but was gradually restricted as imperial power centralized. This pattern repeats throughout history. During World War II, when men were fighting overseas, women suddenly became capable of factory work, engineering, management, roles they'd been biologically unsuited for just years earlier. The moment the war ended, these same women were pushed back into domestic roles, their wartime capabilities mysteriously forgotten. The anthropologist Peggy Reeves Sanday studied over 150 societies and found something remarkable. Gender egalitarianism correlates directly with environmental abundance and social cooperation, while rigid gender hierarchies correlate with resource scarcity and social stratification. Societies create strict gender roles not because biology demands it, but because hierarchy requires it. Perhaps the most revealing evidence comes from societies that explicitly rejected gender role enforcement. The Iroquois Confederacy, which influenced the American Constitution's framers, was matrilineal and gave women significant political power. The Mesua people of China practice walking marriage, where women control property and men have no authority over children. The Bugis people of Indonesia recognize 5 distinct genders, each with specific social roles. These aren't ancient curiosities. Many of these societies persisted into the modern era. Some still exist today. They prove that alternative arrangements aren't just possible, they're functional. They work, sometimes better than our own systems. So if gender roles are constructed, if they're changeable, if they serve power rather than nature, why do they feel so real? Why do they seem so inevitable? The answer lies in what sociologists call the social construction of reality. From the moment we're born, we're immersed in a world that treats gender roles as facts rather than choices. Pink and blue hospital bracelets, different expectations for crying, for aggression, for compliance, different toys, different clothes, different futures mapped out before we can even speak. By the time we're old enough to question these arrangements, they've become part of our neural wiring. They feel natural because they're all we've known. They seem inevitable because we can't imagine alternatives. This is how social construction works. It makes the artificial feel biological. Sociologists Candace West and Don Zimmerman showed how we constantly perform and reinforce gender roles through micro-interactions. Every time we hold a door, choose our words, modify our posture, we're not expressing our natural selves, we're following learned scripts. And every time someone else responds to these performances as normal, they're helping to maintain the system. But here's the crucial insight. If gender roles are performed, they can be performed differently. If they're learned, they can be unlearned. If they're constructed, they can be reconstructed. We're already seeing this happen. Iceland, which has actively worked to eliminate gender role enforcement, now has the highest gender equality in the world and consistently ranks as one of the happiest countries. Sweden's parental leave policies, which encourage fathers to take equal time off, are reshaping masculine identity in real time. Countries that have eliminated gendered toy marketing see children making more diverse play choices. The resistance to these changes reveals how much work goes into maintaining gender roles. When toy companies tried gender-neutral marketing, they faced massive backlash. When schools implemented gender-neutral bathrooms, communities erupted in protest. When companies offered equal parental leave, critics called it social engineering. But that criticism accidentally reveals the truth. Gender roles themselves are social engineering. They're just engineering we've become so accustomed to that we mistake it for nature. The implications go far beyond individual choice. Societies that enforce rigid gender roles waste human potential on a massive scale. How many brilliant minds have been channeled into narrow roles based on their anatomy? How many innovations have we lost because half the population was excluded from certain fields? How many problems remain unsolved because we've artificially limited who gets to work on them? Consider this. Tesla's mother invented numerous household devices but never had the opportunity to develop them professionally. She lived in a world that had decided her gender made her unsuitable for scientific work. How many other inventors, leaders, and innovators have we lost to similar assumptions? The next time someone tells you that gender roles are natural, ask them to explain the Chambuli. Ask them why Spartan women could own property, but Athenian women couldn't. Ask them why American women suddenly became capable of factory work in 1942 and incapable of it in 1946. The uncomfortable truth is that gender roles aren't discoveries about human nature, they're decisions about human society. They're not biological facts, they're political choices. And like all political choices, they can be unmade. We're living through the slow-motion collapse of one of civilization's most persistent assumptions. The question isn't whether gender roles will continue to evolve. They're already evolving, faster than ever before. The question is whether we'll guide that evolution consciously or let it happen to us while pretending it's not happening at all.